back, gamers. I finally got my hands on the first raid tier after a lot of PTR testing and then live testing to check against my own conclusions about how we would perform in this raid tier and how the boss guides would look for this raid tier. So it's time to talk about how you're going to crank in tier 14 in Mists of Pandaria. This is the first video in a 3-video series that will be released following the release of the next 2 raids as well. I have decided to release these retroactively as I didn't want to give you advice on a fight or use week 1 progression strats that would just immediately get nullified the moment you got some gear on your hands. I will be doing the same thing for Heart of Fear and Terrace, as these aren't guides on how to complete the boss. If you want that, you can watch a Jordy video. These videos are going to teach you, the yellow boys, how to blast on every single boss in this raid tier. The other thing I will mention, I will not be talking about combat in this video outside of the fights that it's relevant on because, well, that spec in this current raid tier just kind of sucks, and I don't really want to waste your time, so grab a notepad, sit back, and take some notes. Starting off with the Stone Guard. Stone Guard is the only fight in this raid that you will strictly play combat on. Is it a 4-target cleave fight, and combat, even though it doesn't have the gear to top DPS meters yet, is still absolutely going to demolish Assassination and sub on this fight. Guilds will have you doing one of 2 strats. Either the range paint and the melee just slam the boss, or you have to paint and your DPS will suck regardless. We will still talk about how to paint quickly to minimize downtime, but we are going to focus on the DPS here. As it currently stands, there are 2 lines of thinking when it comes to using agility pots on this fight. The first line of thinking is pre-potting and double potting just for the added uptime. The second is that this fight has a massive damage modifier and you will not have your pot active for the first 150% damage bonus paint. I personally believe that at the moment, the best option is for you to pre-pot, but as you get more gear and this fight length decreases below the 1 minute and 20 second mark or even below that, you'd probably just be better off using it on the first 150% damage bonus with Lust. That any moment you spend not making use of Restless Blades is potential cooldowns that you won't get use of later on in the fight. This is one of those circumstances where I think you just pop all your cooldowns at the start, and then later on as the fight decreases, you would save it for the 150% damage bonus paint. And then you'll pair those with things like Lust, Banner, and Stormlash. But as it currently stands, average fight length on this fight is between 1 minute and 50 seconds to 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which is plenty enough time to see 2 to 3 killing sprees and at least 2 adrenaline rushes and shadow blade pops. And lastly, before we get into implementation, glyphs and talent choices for this fight. For talents, none of these directly impact your DPS too much, but shadow focus is going to be important for your deep insight vanishes, so make sure to run that to make your ambushes really cheap. And Cheat Death is going to be a really nice option in case you accidentally step on a mine without Cloak of Shadows ready. Shadow Step is a good option on the pool to make sure that you limit downtime, but outside of that, nothing too big. For glyphs, you want to have the Glyph of Redirect in the event that you have to swap targets for any reason. Glyph of Smoke Bomb, as a lot of guilds are just stacking all the dogs and popping every raid CD and then tanking the only deadly mechanic this boss actually has, and then the last one's really up to you. Now let's talk implementation. On the pool, you will Tricks the Tank, pre-pot, and then stealth at the 2-second mark. As the pool goes out, you will Shadow Step and ambush, then immediately activate Blade Flurry and Slice and Dice. You will proceed to your normal cooldown opener as combat, Revealing Strike, then Sinister Strike till Shallow Insights, and Killing Spree with Synapse Springs on the dogs. Right after that, you will activate Shadow Blades, Adrenaline Rush, and any racial bonuses that you have and immediately crank all 4 dogs with Blade Flurry up. You will skip Rupture as we aren't using any abilities that don't benefit from Blade Flurry, making your rotation extremely easy. Send as many Eviscerates as possible during Shadow Blades and Adrenaline Rush to capitalize on Restless Blades. Keep Revealing Strike up, and always refresh Slice and Dice at 5 combo points. When your second set of cooldowns comes back off cooldown, firstly, Killing Spree, which should line up with a Deep Insight. If you were in a moderate and close to a Deep Insight, you can always pool combo points with Anticipation. Energy Starve yourself until you're in that Deep Insight, then pop Killing Spree and immediately follow up with your pooled combo points to not lose cooldown reduction on any potential Killing Spree before the end of the fight. If you opted for the pre-pot, use your second pot then, and blast the boss with full CDs. If you want more info on how to play combat, check out the Combat Rotation Guide. I made a small note earlier about combat vanish ambushes. Just make sure that you are in a deep insight when you use them. You don't have to worry about putting preparation on cooldown instantly on this fight because it's so short. So just vanish after your CDs end on the first deep insight for a quick cleave ambush, and then prep when you're energy starved and vanish on the next deep insight after that. Fairly simple fight, all things considered. Not much changes for us as rogues. Now let's talk if you have to paint. If you were forced to paint, forego the Shadow Step talent and pick up Burst of Speed just in case you really need it to minimize downtime on the boss. I have a few macros in my Discord that will cancel any sort of movement speed abilities that would block the use of Sprint and Nitro Boost, so if you aren't in the Discord, make sure to join and grab those. When the call to paint is made, immediately Nitro Boost to your section, grab your debuff, and get as many tiles as you can painted while the boost is up. When it ends, sprint to finish your section and then hop back on the boss. Another tip, scream at your raid leader for making you do it in the first place. Mechanics to look out for. Cobalt Mine and Jasper Chain. Rogues can entirely cloak the Cobalt Mine and clear them for the raid. If you won't lose uptime on the boss doing this, feel free as it will prevent a lot of raid damage. Then Jasper Chain. This links you to another player. If that player is ranged, talk to your guild about having them come into melee because if you are more than 10 yards apart, you will take large amounts of ticking damage until the chain is broken. Now on to Feng. As I said at the start of this video, I won't be talking about combat on this fight, so this is for the assassination and sub rogues. For sub, this fight is going to be fairly straightforward. The glyph and talent options are going to be as follows. Always Hemorrhaging Veins. I like Sprint on this boss. As he runs from corner to corner, it can help limit downtime on melees, which I think is a big bonus. And the last is up to you. In terms of talents, you don't really have any hard requirements besides Shadow Focus and Anticipation. On all the single target fights that don't require a lot of movement, I just run Shadow Step for the opener, and I also run Cheat Death just in case I do something dumb. For Assassination, you always run the Vendetta glyph, and then Sprint for the previously mentioned reason, and the last is up to you. For talents, the same talents mentioned for sub work for Assassination. The only change is, instead of Anticipation, you will run Mark for Death. We don't care about pooling combo points because Assassination is more focused on Envenom uptime. Mark for Death will offer more overall Envenom uptime than any other level 90 talent. Feng, outside of his ad phase, is one of the few bosses that we would consider a patchwork fight in Mists of Pandaria, alongside the next boss, Spiritbinder. There are a decent bit of moving parts on this fight, they just don't really apply to us as a melee DPS. So we just get to crank the boss, which means we really just get to hyper optimize our cooldown and burst windows, which is great for us. For sub, you will do your normal cooldown rotation on the opener, tricks before pull, pre-pod at 2 seconds, and then pre-med slice, and then shadow step and ambush the boss. Pop your racial and shadow blades, then proceed to your normal cooldown rotation of waiting till find weakness falls off while pulling for shadow dance. Pop shadow dance at 90 energy, spam ambush and eviscerate, maybe refresh slice or rupture if need be, and then you're on to your normal rotation. A lot of logs are showing people trending towards making sure their trinket procs on pull are synced with their shadow dances later on in the fight. And for those of you seeing that, don't worry at the current fight length. Syncing your trinkets with dance is actually virtually no DPS gain, maybe plus or minus 5 DPS. You're essentially trading find weakness uptime for more modifiers on your ambush, and it evens out. But as fight times decrease, I think this habit will become more relevant, so consider looking into it. All you really need to do is, after your first ambush, hemo, then apply a 5 combo point rupture, rip Shadow Dance immediately, and then every 1 minute, pull to 90 energy as it's coming off cooldown to make sure you get an optimal lineup with your trinkets. In terms of optimization for this fight with sub, all you really need to pay attention to is pulling properly for Shadow Dance, making sure you are getting 4 ambushes off during your dance, and then pulling combo points during your vanishes so that you get 2 finishers off during Master of Shadows. Save your in-combat Agi pot for when the cooldowns line back up, i.e. Shadow Blades, Racial, Dance, and Vanish. This should be near the end of the fight, and as we get gear, you will probably see this window get really tight near the end of the fight.
That's what she said!
Or you might not see a second Shadow Blades at all. Just use combat pot with Vanish and Dance. For Assassination, you will do your normal cooldown rotation on this boss, tricks onto the tank before pull, pre-pot and stealth at 2 seconds, shadow step the boss, mutilate, immediately rupture, then mutilate again into slice and dice, pop Vendetta, Shadow Blades, Synapse Springs, any racial modifiers, and mark for death immediately. You'll then envenom, and then continue on to your normal cooldown rotation. Make sure to use both Vanish and Prep Vanish during Vendetta to maximize the amount of mutilates that you get with the damage amplifier, as well as any external modifiers like Stormlash and Skull Banner. Use Dispatch as a filler whenever it procs. Make sure you are going to 5 combo points with Dispatch procs whenever you are at 4 combo points. The only time you wouldn't do this is when you have Shadow Blades active to not waste extra combo points generated. The current fight length on Feng is roughly 4 to 5 minutes for the average guild at the moment. This guarantees you 2 uses of Vendetta and Shadow Blades. After some testing, it's been shown that Vendetta popped with Shadow Blades is outright a DPS increase over using them apart from one another. If you have a kill timer above 4 minutes and 30 seconds, feel free to use your first Vendetta with Shadow Blades, then second Vendetta without, then relining your third Vendetta back up with your second Shadow Blades at 4 minutes. If you are below, hold Vendetta for Shadow Blades so that you can benefit from them both being active at the same time for the damage amp. This should also be during the execute phase, which means you will also swap your generator over to dispatch entirely. No matter the kill time, just make sure to send your combat pot with the second set of full cooldowns, i.e. Vendetta, Shadow Blades, Racial Bonuses, and Synapse Springs. In terms of mechanics for both specs, ads currently don't count on logs. They are an extremely easy mechanic. DKs just mass grip them, and then they get blendered down by the raid. If your guild/raid is struggling with this mechanic, run Sharp Knives to mass expose armor on all the ads with Fen of Knives. If they aren't struggling, ignore the ads entirely and DPS the boss. The only mechanics that you need to worry about are Epicenter, which reduces your hit rating by 75%, so if you have the opportunity to dump energy before it goes out, try to, as you will miss a lot of your abilities during this time. As well as this, don't pop cooldowns during this time because you will miss out on a lot of DPS. Then the other ability is Wildfire Spark. This must be ran out of the raid, which means downtime, but it's not a big deal, just shadow step back onto the boss and you're fine. And now on to Spearbinder. Spearbinder is actually a full patchwork fight for both Assassination and Sub-Rogues. The main mechanics of this fight are handled by different classes, so we actually just get to sit on the boss. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the same jargon from Feng because it all applies in the exact same capacity on this fight as it did on Feng. Spearbinder on average is a 3-minute and 30-second fight to 4-minute and 30-second fight length, meaning that you are currently guaranteed 2 Shadowblade uses, so the same rules apply to Spearbinder that apply to Feng in terms of CD usage. Make sure to save your combat pot for when you have all of your cooldowns active, i.e. Dance, Shadowblades, Synapse Springs, Vanish, and Racial for sub. For Assassination, it's Shadowblades, Vendetta, Synapse Spring, Vanish, and Racial. The fight length could reach below 3 minutes for this fight in full gear. If this happens, just adjust your CDs for sub to combat pot with Vanish coming off CD after your first prep Vanish, and pair it with Shadow Dance. For Assassination, just save your second Vendetta for sub 35% when you swap your generator to Dispatch. This fight is extremely simple. Towards the end, the raid damage starts to get a little hectic. Just be careful about using Smoke Bomb as a raid CD. There seems to be a weird interaction with it and the Shadow Bolts that hit the raid. Make sure to have a conversation about the people topside stacking so everyone is in the potential Smoke Bomb pop. There might be an interaction with Smoke Bomb where the targeting is causing everyone outside the Smoke Bomb to be the only targets to get hit. If that's the case, they could get one shot by the Shadow Bolts, as there are very little targets outside of the Smoke Bomb for the Shadow Bolts to target onto. So Spirit Kings is a special case used for combat because combat actually kind of is useful here. I'm not going to speak too heavily on how to optimize DPS for this spec on this fight because, well, your DPS is botched because the purpose that you serve is just a really long kidney shot on the second boss in this fight, Subutai the Swift. Big things to note here, you will do your normal cooldown rotation on this boss and just turn Blade Flurry on whenever you can for a little extra cleave DPS. A bad thing about cleaving though is that it heavily impacts your energy regen, and you always need to easily have available 5 combo points when Subutai is active for a 5 combo point kidney when he is casting Sleight of Hand to make sure he's not debuffing your raid. Some of you will ask the question,
why are people playing combat on this fight if it's so bad?
Well, Revealing Strike makes your kidney shot an 8.1 second stun, which perfectly matches the entire debuff window of Sleight of Hand, meaning that multiple people don't have to stun. And with the Prey on the Weak talent, we also get to buff the raid's damage during this time, meaning that the entire raid gets a minor DPS bonus while we suffer. Outside of this, as combat, just make sure that you are never killing spreeing the bosses while these abilities listed on screen are active. Also, in terms of your combat pot, generally speaking, there will be at least one window after Subutai is dead or Slight has gone on cooldown where you have Killing Spree, Shadow Blades, and Adrenaline Rush up when Zien and Subutai or Meng are both active at the same time. This is the perfect opportunity to turn on Blade Flurry, activate all your DPS cooldowns with your combat pot, and blender both bosses. Just be careful not to wipe the raid on either a Shield of Darkness or a Maddening Shout or a Pillage depending on how your boss transition goes. Keep in mind, whenever one of the bosses is doing one of the no-touch abilities, you can just redirect into another boss, especially while running the redirect glyph, and just DPS the other boss, as these abilities are always desynced from one another. For Sub and Assassination, these fights are very simple because we only really have one active target and both specs suck for the stun, as they require combo points, so that job is usually enlisted to someone else in your raid if they aren't making you play combat. In terms of glyph selection, all 3 specs will want to use the redirect glyph during transitions between bosses, and for the event that a no-touching ability is active so that you can swap to and from the new activated boss quickly and back to the primary kill target while not losing your combo points. Don't worry about immediately swapping back if your redirect is on CD, just focus on optimizing your combo points as you want to not lose combo points target swapping constantly. More so to that point, redirect glyph will actually offer a DPS gain for both Sub and Assassination in their own right. Whenever a new boss spawns, make sure you are multi-dotting both active bosses at the same time. For Assassination, you want to focus on keeping up Deadly Poison and Rupture on both bosses at the same time. For Sub, you want to focus on keeping up Rupture, Deadly Poison, and Hemo on both bosses at the same time. This can get a little annoying on Kweong because whenever he casts his Impervious Shield, he resets all of his debuffs and you have to reapply. But this brings me to the Sub portion of this boss guide. For Sub, you will do your normal opener, but Pop Prep, but hold Vanish till after the boss has used his first Impervious Shield. This mechanic is perfectly choreographed, so this will always happen unless you burn the boss before he ever uses it in the first place, which honestly might be a possibility. After the shield has been dispelled, you can send your Vanish with Pre-Med Ambush and then instantly reapply a Master of Shadows Rupture on the boss, and you won't get robbed of your Find Weakness uptime if you opted to pop immediately instead. This boss is fairly dynamic of when cooldowns usage should be popped. If you're going to lose uptime on your cooldowns because there's only one boss active, simply hold them. It's a DPS loss to pop any sort of cooldown and then get stuck doing nothing while one of the abilities that stops you DPSing is active, so pay attention. Whenever a new boss activates, redirect into them quickly so long as you don't have an active Find Weakness on your current target, and Rupture/Hemo them to ensure you are getting good uptime with dots on both targets. A little note here, don't reapply Ruptures on bosses that are about to die, as it's not an energy efficient input, and your Hemo will cover your Sanguinary Veins debuff anyway. Line up your combat pot with Shadow Blades, Dance, Vanish, and Racial abilities. Depending on the kill times, this could either be the second or third boss, but if you have the opportunity and a combat rogue in your raid, using this in tandem with Prey on the Weak stun for Subutai is always a good option. If your guild isn't popping Lust at the start of the fight, just try to pair it with Lust, Skull Banner, and Stormlash if possible. For Assassination, your normal cooldown rotation is totally acceptable on this fight at the start. Generally speaking, fight times for this boss are all over the place. Some guilds have this down to about 6 minutes, other guilds have this up to about 9 minutes, meaning that you could, depending on your raid skill, have a much shorter or longer kill time. So I want to take a moment to speak about the importance of not losing uptime on your Vendetta. The no-touching abilities on each boss can significantly stunt your burst DPS if you don't pay attention to them. Your first Vendetta on the opener is free. Impervious Shield does not come out for the first 40 seconds on the first boss. On Subutai, it really depends on how much you trust your stunners, but lining up Vendetta on Subutai with Combat Rogue's Prey on the Weak talent would be a good DPS increase for you. So if your stunner is competent and you trust them, send your Vendetta off cooldown on that boss to capitalize on that damage amp. On the third boss, the first Shield of Darkness comes out at around 20 seconds after he activates, so you never want to send your Vendetta on the boss as he activates because it would nerf your burst window with Vendetta significantly. But after a Shield of Darkness goes out, you have a 40-second window to use Vendetta freely, meaning that you should opt to wait. The fourth boss is also a 40-second window on Maddening Shout, and though I don't think this is that big of a deal, depending on the way that your guild breaks the mind control, it could result in a DPS loss for you if you get slowed and the boss starts moving. So just to be safe, immediately either rip Cloak when the MC goes out if you pop Vendetta, or wait till after Maddening Shout has gone out. Also, the fourth boss reflects damage back onto the player, so be careful not to kill yourself on Meng during the burst window as the damage reflect gets stronger and stronger over time. That cautionary warning really goes for all three specs, but it will chunk Assassination Rogue specifically harder than the others. As far as when it comes to using your combat pot, again, kill times vary heavily on this, and so does when your raid chooses to pop Lust, as well as when they use Skull Banner and Stormlash. But just communicate with your raid on when they plan to use those, and line up your Vendetta, Racial, Synapse Springs, and Shadow Blades with any of the external damage amps that you can to maximize the effectiveness of your combat pot. Before we move on to Elagon, if you guys like the weak aura pack that's on screen, it's available to anyone who subscribes to my Twitch or becomes a member on YouTube alongside the rest of my entire UI. Make sure if you do subscribe or become a member to join my Discord and connect your YouTube/Twitch account to your Discord account so that you have access to it. Anyone who supports through either method helps keep these videos pumping. So thank you to all of my subscribers and members.
I think if like Ranger like grouped up on your hero.
Me first, Vay second, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I just fell through the floor?
Shadow stat soon.
For Elagon, the glyph setup for this boss is going to be heavily dependent on the strat that your guild uses for the transition phase of this boss. In full raid gear on PTR, we only needed 2 people assigned to each energy charge. And so what we did as rogues was ran sharp knives, jumped, and fanned every charge just to reduce their armor to help people kill them faster. In current gear, we are assigned to energy charges so that we push more waves before we transition. So this will vary based off of your raid's proficiency at killing charges and how geared you are. For sub, I am currently running the Hemo glyph, redirect for the energy charges, and the third one is your choice. Personally, I think Sprint might have some relevancy here for clearing stacks, but that's up to you. We have Shadow Step, and you can clear your stacks as you follow the energy charge out of the boss arena. Assassination can run the same, but obviously you will want to swap the Hemorrhaging Veins glyph for the Vendetta glyph. In terms of talents, generally speaking, none of these are super impactful outside of the 2 needed glyphs for both specs. Sub will take Anticipation as previously mentioned, Assassination will take Mark for Death, but both specs will take Shadow Focus. Cheat Death is okay here in case you mess up on either bombs or during transition phases, or just forget to clear your stacks, or if you do it intentionally to stay on the boss longer. Otherwise, my main suggestion is just to use Shadow Step to make sure you can clear stacks between energy charges, and then you can immediately Shadow Step back onto the boss to reduce any potential downtime. One important note is that Mark for Death is not resetting when you use it on energy charges, and is not needed to kill them anyways. So despite how great it would be if it did work, only use it on Elagon. Now let's talk about Assassination. Kill times vary heavily here, so in terms of cooldowns, you're looking at a 4 to 7 minute fight depending on your raid. If you're closer to the 4-minute marker, you should be expecting 2 full cooldown phases. Do your normal opener with Shadow Blades, Vendetta, Racial, Synapse Springs, and Vanishes, and focus the boss. Most guilds are currently opting to pop Lust after the first transition when the damage amp is stacked up. That is usually at the 3-minute marker to line back up with Stormlash and Banner Refreshing. So this should line up perfectly with your second set of cooldowns. Regardless of the kill times of your group, you will save your second Vanish to use with Shadow Blades and all of the other modifiers I previously mentioned. During the second set of cooldowns, you will also blow your combat pot to make sure you are optimizing your second cooldown phase. You will more than likely have to swap to adds during this, but if you don't, congrats, you just get to sit on the boss and crank. For those of you swapping to adds, there is an important ebb and flow to the way that you kill adds. It doesn't seem like energy charges are giving energy returns from ruptures, so you will never rupture the adds as it won't tick long enough to validate the cost. I think this is the same reason that energy charges aren't resetting Marked for Death. The second note to make about energy charges is that you will 100% not want to redirect to them, and rather redirect from them onto the boss. The reason for this is, you will not be able to keep up rupture on the boss with full uptime without this. On top of that, you will need to plan your combo points and refreshes of Rupture accordingly to when adds are getting close to spawning. The last thing you want is to waste your combo points target swapping to and from the adds. The reason it is better to redirect from the adds is that you will always be able to validate the combo points gained on Elagon, and after a few weeks of gearing, energy charges will die extremely quickly, and losing combo points on Elagon for an add that will fall over simply is a DPS loss for you. The only other main thing to note is to understand and pay attention to how many waves of adds your guild intends on killing and how much time you have before the phase transition. The last thing you want is to pop Vendetta and then your guild transitions the boss and you lose half your main DPS cooldown to the transition phase / immunity. For sub, you will do your normal cooldown rotation. Depending on the strat used for Elagon, you might want to send your cooldowns early if they intend to have you stop DPSing, so that you don't lose out on your burst DPS phase to stop an early transition to kill a second boss ad. This means nerfing your uptime for fight and weakness, but as the damage amp builds over the fight, you don't want to have your cooldowns not available by the time Lust, Skull Banner, and Stormlash are popped. Nothing too crazy, but something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind, because the boss has a stacking damage amplifier over the fight, you might also look to not using preparation during your initial cooldown phase at the start of the fight, because you might want to be able to benefit on shorter kill times from preparation Vanish being used during the later half of the fight when you have a larger damage modifier. For your combat pot, most guilds are using it around the time Skull Banner comes back up with the damage amp on the boss currently, so your Shadow Blades will be available to you. Just make sure to save big cooldowns for when Lust is activated. If your guild slightly delays the Lust pop, don't rip Blades and Racials off CD, pair it with them and your combat pot to be efficient with the external damage modifiers. When it comes to sub-killing energy charges, you want to ensure that you are always applying Hemo on the energy charges to make sure that you aren't losing out on any damage modifier from Sanguinary Veins. But you never want to apply Rupture for the same reason that Assassination isn't as well. Make sure you never redirect into energy charges, and always redirect from energy charges into Elagon to ensure that you are keeping up Rupture, Hemo, and Slice and Dice all at the same time on Elagon while swapping to and from energy charges. Things that you can do to capitalize on any DPS gains for all 3 specs. Though the sparks do not count on logs, you can refresh your Slice and Dice on them as Elagon transitions back into phase 1 where his platform is active. For sub, you can refresh Slice and Dice and keep 5 combo points in the anticipation pool for immediately when Elagon becomes active again, or even 10 combo points and then redirect into Elagon. For Assassination, you can keep 5 combo points to immediately reapply Rupture back onto the boss. Be sure not to redirect on any spec while he is immune, as you will lose those combo points. Only after the boss is active to take damage will redirect work. If you want to push your luck with resetting your stacks to limit downtime, Cheat Death can act as a pseudo cloak if you aren't worried about potentially dying and your healers are good, meaning you can push your stacks really far. Even more so, Cloak doesn't reset your stacks, but it does immune the damage from energy charges dying, meaning you can Cloak to reduce downtime between energy charge swaps and getting back to the boss by having to leave the boss arena. Do both at your own peril, and don't yell at me or blame me if you die and your raid leader gets pissed. And finally, Will of the Emperor, the last boss of Mogu'Shan Vaults. It's actually my favorite fight of the raid tier at the moment, when it works properly.
Okay. Yep, just got hit by a strike there. That makes perfect sense, right, chat? not on that.
Town options are actually super important on this fight. Glyph choices are super easy here, but redirect glyph and sprint glyph are both great options as there is a lot of target swapping depending on your raid strategy and how much they utilize your toolkit as a rogue. Obviously sub always uses Hemo, and assassination will always use the vendetta glyph. If you're soaking sparks as a rogue, hard requirements are elusiveness to make sure that you can live through soaking sparks with feint, as well as burst of speed to make sure you can get around the room quickly. But even if you aren't soaking sparks, burst of speed is extremely good for scary moments while doing DDR on the bosses to make sure that you don't lose any potential opportunistic strikes, as they have a massive DPS boost. We still want to optimize our DPS on the ads, so we will start with that portion of the fight, then talk about the strategies used for the bosses themselves. For assassination, you will immediately rip Marked for Death on the first strength that spawns. Unlike Elagon, it actually works on this boss, thank God. This will give you a little leg up and some free DPS, as well as any subsequent ads that spawn before the bosses become active. Make sure to get up Slice and Dice here, as you can freely maintain it on the ads while they spawn before the boss is active. Important note, energy returns from Rupture are working on these ads. Though I don't think that's relevant at the start of the fight, it will be relevant during the fight, so make sure to Rupture as assassination so you have lots of energy for when you return to the boss, / energy to use for burst of speed to get back to the boss if you were killing ads in your raid. Most guilds currently are running 2 druids to completely nullify the rage ads. Sub can use these ads in tandem with Honor Among Thieves the moment the fight starts to generate combo points into anticipation points. This will give you a free Slice and Dice, as well as a free redirect onto the first strength that spawns. These ads die fairly quickly, so Rupture isn't a good option to use on these ads, but make sure to Hemo for Sanguinary Veins to ensure that you are getting your damage buff. More so, the bosses aren't active for the first minute of the fight, meaning that you can pop a free Shadow Dance on the first strength that spawns, and it will be back up by the time the bosses are active. When the bosses become active and are in position is when most guilds are going to choose to pop Lust. For Assassination, you're just going to rip all your cooldowns alongside it. Vendetta, Shadow Blades, Synapse Springs, and Racials, and both vanishes with your combat pot. Don't worry about pre-pot here, it's absolutely useless and you don't even get to start the fight in stealth. Just make sure to always leave a little wiggle room with your energy pulling in case during a dance you are in a bad position and need to use Burst of Speed to get out of that position. This is obviously only relevant after you've exhausted both Sprint and Nitro Boost. Fight times for this boss are absolutely all over the place. I have seen 7-minute kills and I've seen 12-minute kills. It really depends on whether your guild is good or bad at this boss. So a general rule of thumb, just don't waste your Vendetta at a time in which you would be forced to swap to ads. That's about it. Save your Vendetta for when it's going to be active with Shadow Blades. If you get near the end of the fight and don't have Shadow Blades available but do have a Vendetta, just send it. Always pair Vanish and Vendetta when possible, but the same rule applies. If you don't get a Vendetta and have a Vanish available for the boss dies, use it. For sub, you will do your normal cooldown rotation once the bosses are in position with your combat pot, Shadow Dance, and Shadow Blades with Racial, Synapse Springs, and Vanish and Prep Vanish. Same rule applies as Assassination. Leave a small amount of wiggle room in the event you have exhausted your Nitro Boost and Sprint for Burst of Speed. Make sure on the later half of the fight to try not to waste your cooldowns. You can basically freely pop these cooldowns so long as you wouldn't be wasting your Find Weakness uptime on the boss by having to swap to the ads. So be careful with those timers. And do not pop cooldowns on the ads after the bosses are active. Also, try not to screw yourself with popping Burst of Speed during Shadow Dance, as you will not get your optimal 4 ambushes and 2 eviscerates. If you have to though, pop your last ambush right before the dance ends to maximize your Find Weakness uptime rather than screwing yourself over even harder. Now, let's talk about if you're in a raid that is making you soak sparks, kill ads, and also DPS the bosses. The simple answer is, you're kind of screwed, man. It's a bit of a GG moment. You will miss a ton of opportunistic strikes because you aren't able to dance constantly, but a general rule of thumb here is, just don't waste your combo points on the ad/boss. Redirect often and always when available. I hope you guys like my rogue guide for MSV. If you did, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, this is the first guide in a 3-video series that will release as the other 2 raids come out. If all of this was confusing to you, please make sure to check out my rogue rotation guides and then come back to this video to get a better understanding of what you just watched here. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace out, gamers.